For those of you who don't know the story of the Good Samaritan from the Bible, it's a story about a traveling Jew who's walking, he's robbed and beaten, and then a traveler from Samaria saves his life pretty much. And in this story, the Good Samaritan is going to be played by Eitan, who I was living with at the time, and I am going to get to play the role of the Jew, which for a goy who spent most of his formative years in Thornhill is actually kind of a dream come true. Ani many berry breed. Feels really good. Thanks, guys. So I guess my first thing I should tell you guys is I am a coward. I have always been a coward. I will always probably be a coward. One of the things about being a coward, which is really, really tough, just to deal in your everyday life, you have to tell yourself that you're not. So, you know, if someone's like, oh man, like, I could probably, like, fight that guy, no problem. Or like, oh man, like, I could ask out that girl, I just choose not to. Being alone's way better. Or like, oh man, that's not poison ivy, it's eczema, that just looks like poison ivy, I'm fine! Like, it's, you just, a lot of denial going on. I think the tough thing of being a coward is when you encounter trauma, you have to deal with two things. Number one, the event. And number two, realizing you're not the person that you thought you were, or what you told yourself you were. And in 2008, that actually happened to me when I was home invaded. I was lying in my bed wearing an Incredible Hulk t-shirt, no pants, and listening to Leslie Feist's 1, 2, 3, 4. I heard a noise coming through my kitchen, and I was living with a thrash metal band at the time called Fatality, and I was like, oh, these guys are going to play a lot of loud music. So I went to go close the door, and what I saw were two guys. One was like a 5'8" Asian guy with a rifle, and then a 6'3" black guy holding a beer bottle, and both of them had masks over their face. And I'm told that in these moments that you have a flight or fight response. Like some people like try and fight their attackers, some people try and like run and get away. I opted for neither. My third option was to look at them and then loudly and audibly say, "Oh no!" And then slowly close the door. It didn't take long until these guys are like kicking down the door, and what felt like 7 minutes, which is probably only 15 seconds of me like bracing the door as hard as I could, the door finally fell down. Like not just like the door, like the frame around the door fell down, and they told me to lie face first down on my bed, and they tied me up with my iPod charger cord. After which the Asian guy went around the house and started collecting all of our stuff, and the black guy stood there with his beer bottle and said, "Don't move, don't you fucking move, or I'll smash your fucking head in!" And he just said that like again and again, like a lullaby from The Wire. It was really terrible. I should just point this out that he brought his own beer bottle because it was Molson Export Dry, and we were really, really poor, but we weren't like Molson Export Dry poor. We were like Labatt 50 poor, like Peterborough poor, so like he brought that as a weapon from his own house, which I think is kind of fun. Anyways, so while I was lying there, he grabbed my wallet and was like, "Oh, $70, nice, this is great." Oh, I should point out, he's not Irish, he's Jamaican, it's just like the best my mouth can do. And he was like, "Oh, Robert Lee Norman, that'd be a pretty good name." I'm like, okay, yeah, it's alright. May 28th, 1982. Oh, 26, that's how old I am. It's like, that's not what you're supposed to tell people when you're robbing them. Don't give them information that they can use later. And I'm always afraid of dying, but for some reason something sparked in me, and I blurted out this very, very strange thing. I said to him, I pleaded with him, I said, "Please, take my money, take my credit card, take my debit card, but can you leave my driver's license? Like, to get a new one, you have to wait in line a long time, and it's a big inconvenience." And the guy looked at me a little bit confused and went, "Good point, there you go." And then I really eagerly said, "Oh, and my health card." He goes, "Don't push your luck, Robert." Which is good, because every relationship needs boundaries. And I pointed out, well, these guys were like moving stuff. They didn't have gloves, so they were just kind of like pulling their shirts or their hoodies over their hands and moving things like 10-year-olds in the bathroom who didn't want to use the door. And at this point I realized, I don't think I'm getting robbed by professionals here. When the Asian guy came back in, I took a look at the gun, and my horror was replaced with humiliation when I looked at the barrel of the gun. It was about this big. And I realized I was being robbed by a BB gun, which is kind of the worst. So the entire time while they were threatening me, I kept moving my head away from them because I thought, like, I'm not going to die, but I still could lose an eye. And I was thinking, like, if I wasn't such a coward, like, I could have fought these guys, like, I may get hurt, but I would have been fine, and now I'm going to lose all my stuff, and this sucks. And then finally the black guy goes, where your fucking weed be at? I'm like, buddy, I don't really smoke weed. And he goes, we'll see about that. And he winds up and he punches me right in the ribs. And if you've ever been in a fight, you know how that feels like, right? It's like, there's like this like weird Saving Private Ryan kind of moment where everything's kind of a blur, and then you feel what it feels like. So I felt the hit, and then I waited. And I was like, are my ribs broken? What does this feel like? And then literally nothing came, and I realized he gave me a sissy punch. And I was like, that's how it must feel like to get punched by me. Like his heart was just not in it. And then the Asian guy says, let's end this, like really dramatically. And he pulls up the rifle and goes to knock me unconscious. And I wait to be knocked unconscious. I think that the thing the three of us didn't realize is you have to hit someone really hard to knock them unconscious. So she went, ow, man, jeez! And the black guy goes, I think he's had enough. And so they start walking around and grabbing all of our stuff, and then maybe about 10 minutes later, I hear in the distant background, oh, the cops, we gotta go! And they run, and they go. And I guess my roommate downstairs, Eitan, had called the police. And the thing that didn't make sense to the police at the time is, like, if you take up all your stuff, like your TVs, your computers, that's going to add up to maybe like $100 to $300 on the street. It really doesn't make sense to rob a normal person, but to rob a drug dealer makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of money there. And apparently Eitan was dealing drugs out of our basement the entire time. And they had gone to every single room in the house except for Eitan's in the basement. And he was sitting on a couch of weed, like thousands and thousands of dollars of weed. And I went out there and I gave my statement to the police. And after they were done, the police were like, is that your 2000 Oldsmobile? And I was like, no. And I looked over and the trunk was open and all the doors were open and all of our stuff was in there. And the criminals had driven their mom's car to our house, and when things had gone wrong, they had just left it there. So they had fingerprints, and they had a car, and I was like, this is the worst, so embarrassing. At the end of the night, the cop pulled me over and said, Rod, you said the BB gun, the caliber was about this big? And I was like, yeah, those guys were so dumb, such idiots. And at the end of the night, he reached into the back of the trunk and pulled out a box of 22 caliber bullets and said, a rifle that's a 22 has a barrel about this big, and there are bullets all over the back seat, and that gun was definitely loaded. And they were telling me that most of the time, the most dangerous thing that can happen in a robbery is getting hit by a gun, because it can get backfire or it can go off randomly. And he was like, you are incredibly lucky that you survived that with two people who didn't know what they were doing. And in that moment, I realized that was the first time in my life where I have ever been in a situation and not been a coward. And it was completely by accident. Thank you.